Shalom, party people, and welcome to the 12th C. Got Mr. JD Stone on my right.
Good morning.
So, Mr. Josh, and you got some numbers after your name, and I don't remember your numbers, asks, what brand of Christian or Jew am I? Because notices that I wear part of the Blue Dangly Mafia with my Tziots. And I think you pointed out my hat. This is just a skull cap. This isn't anything special. It's not a kufi. It's not a yarmulke or anything along those lines. It's just a skull cap that was a few bucks at the athletic store. But it get cold sometimes, so I wear. But Mr. JD Stone's wearing a beanie too.
Yep.
So this one's just a little bit tighter knit. But anyway, asks what brand of Christianity or sect of Judaism I am. And there's honestly not an accurate description. I attend a big C Christian church. I follow Torah as best I can. So, I mean, it's kind of a smorgasbord in all honesty. But short answer, and Mr. JD Stone can probably Q&A me a little bit to draw out some more out of this. But short answer is I am not Jewish by birth. I have not converted to Judaism or anything along those lines. I am an outsider, be it a goy or a Gentile or a non-Jew, whatever you want to call me, who has a deep love and respect for my Messiah. And I recognize his name as Yeshua. I mean, you could translate that out to English and call him Joshua if you want. You call him Jesus, that's his name.
That's just translated into Greek.
Yeah, it is. You can call him Jesus if you're speaking Spanish. You can call him Isa if you're speaking Arabic. Those are all acceptable. That being said, he was Jewish. He spoke Hebrew, spoke Aramaic, probably spoke Greek with an accent. Calling him Yeshua is one of the likely pronunciations of his name. Whether it's Yeshua or Yeshua or Yehoshua, you can call him Joshua in English if you want to.
Because we speak it with an accent.
Yes. Anyone who says that they don't speak with an accent is fooling themselves. But anyway, my glasses are fogging up with all this fog. But I believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And I recognize that he was a Jewish man who walked the face of the earth and he kept the Torah. And I feel convicted to follow Torah as best I can. I'm not a woman, so never will be, despite what gender ideology says. Because I'm a man, I was born with a penis. So, boom, that's all I need. And so the Torah laws about women don't apply to me. There's currently no temple. So the temple laws, as much as people want to keep them, until someone builds a tabernacle or a temple at the direct order of Yahweh our Elohim.
That's the kicker.
Yeah, because someone can build one, but if it's not following his rules, and that doesn't mean that one being built isn't prophesied, because there's going to be another one. It's just, is it being built at his orders or not, is the question. So,
and you told me they are working very hard to build one right now.
So everything except for the Ark of the Covenant is in place to build another temple right now. The walls are prefabbed. All of the furniture is already made. They have everything but the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, and you said they even had the red bulls.
The red heifers?
Red heifers,
yeah,
yes.
They can't be bulls, they have to be heifers.
Yes, red. Yes.
Yeah, so they have, I believe it's either 7 or 9 red heifers distinguished that by Passover of 2024, they will be ready. And there's already, I think there's 1 or 2 of them that were disqualified.
Oh no.
But they've got like either 7 or 9 of them. So the odds that they'll have one is there. And so they can do the waters of purification, which anybody who's ever made soap before realizes that that's what they're making, because they have a red heifer, they sacrifice it, and they burn it over cedar, and the drippings from the fat mixed in with the ashes of the cedar are gathered up. So you have fat and ashes. Well, ashes is how you make lye. So you have lye and you have animal fat that you mix together. So what are they making? They're making soap. Now it's a special kind of soap, and it is outright commanded in Leviticus to make this. So we don't know why it's a red heifer. Why isn't it some other kind of animal? But ultimately, the why doesn't necessarily matter. It was commanded by God. So, okay, cool. You said it, we'll do it. But no, they're making soap to cleanse the high priests. And they allegedly have people who are lined up that are all in the right genetic line, that whoever they believe is truly anointed to be the high priest will be their new high priest. Which, unless it's commanded by God to do that, then they're just following what they think they're supposed to be doing. And so, because we know that Jesus is the new high priest, so whatever they do is going to be on man's order, not on God's order at this point. But anyway, tangent aside, because we're going on a bird walk for 6 minutes. I'm a non-Jew who has a deep respect for the Torah. I feel convicted to keep Torah. That does not make me special. Honestly, that kind of adds to burden. That kind of adds to I'm willingly placing myself under that covenant, which people are like, you can't do that. Actually, you can. There's provision in the Torah to join yourself to the house of a Jew and be permanently bonded to that family. You can come in as a sojourner and bond servant to that family, and then after 7 years be permitted to leave, and when you leave you'll be richly blessed. But say, no, I love my master, I love my wife, my kids, and everything that has been bestowed upon me, and I want to stay and permanently be part of the house of Israel. And you lay your head onto the doorposts of the house, and what's on that doorposts is the Mezuzah, which is the law, or at least a copy of it. So you have a copy of the law, and then the blood of the Passover lamb is also on that doorpost. So the blood and the law, and your ear is run through with an awl, and it's symbolic of you being permanently bonded to that house. And so I haven't been in 7 years yet, so not there, but permanently bonding to the house of Israel hasn't happened for me yet. But I'm sojourning right now in keeping Torah, and I'm liking what I see. There's groups of people who think that you're required to keep Torah if you follow Jesus, and I disagree. I don't think everyone's called to keep Torah. I just feel personally called to keep it.
I think that
Mr. J.D. Stone right here doesn't keep Torah, and that's okay.
yeah, I think it's pretty clear in Galatians, and especially in Galatians, but in others, Pauline letters, that the main argument in there was circumcision, and which is just part of the Torah. And
Paul even brings in circumcision of the heart, which is not a New Testament concept. That actually existed in Deuteronomy.
right,
He's telling his people that he's trying to get to the heart of the matter and not just the physical rules that are there, which Jesus echoed when he was like, dude, you want the law? Here's the law.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's very clear that keeping Torah, especially for Goyim, is not required.
it's not required. I come across this Chinese restaurant that the owners didn't speak very good English, and that's okay. That meant the food was really good.
Yeah.
And relatively nice. And when you called and you tried to make a reservation, they're like, oh yeah, reservation is required but not recommended.
Yeah.
It was like, hang on a second, do you require that I make a reservation but you don't recommend that I do? Just laughed about it, but I don't think that keeping Torah for people who are non-Jew is required, but I'm choosing to place myself under that covenant, and you don't have to.
Yeah, the other issue, was eating meat sacrificed to idols, and I'm actually reading a book right now about how religious Rome was at that time, and boy, it was very religious. I can see how that was a contentious issue in Acts, and they said that was okay, even.
Well, but if it caused your brother to stumble,
but if it caused, exactly, so it's a nuanced position.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why I don't think that following Torah is required, especially for those outside. Now, I think that Peter made the case that if you were a Jew to begin with, and taking on the Torah was not going to be an onerous burden for you, then that might be the best witness that you could bear for Christ, would be to continue to keep it.
Well, and so here's some insight, I guess. Why I keep Torah, or some of the reasons, I guess, why I keep Torah, is I am a kinesthetic learner. I learn by doing. And I make a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes educate me a lot more than just reading about something theoretically.
Right.
And, so I guess the gateway drug to keeping Torah is keeping Sabbath. We had some non-Jews, non-Hebrew roots, Torah keeping people, just normal big C Christians that we knew. They were like, hey, we're keeping Sabbath and it has richly, richly blessed our family. You should try it. Okay, cool. So we started with a few hours on Saturday. Just, hey, we're gonna block off this time and we're just gonna chill. And it was amazing. And then we blocked off a little bit more time after a few weeks to where it was half the day. And then we blocked off a little bit more time. And then all of a sudden, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, we're keeping Shabbat. And I can tell you there's something to it. It's hard because you are literally blocking off the day that we're not gonna do anything that we see as work. And the litmus test is if you're doing it and all of a sudden you're like, you're doing work. That's kind of our unofficial whatever. Because I may enjoy mowing my yard, but after about 20 minutes, I'm working. So how about I not mow my yard on Shabbat? I may enjoy doing dishes, but if there's a pile of them.
So he started with keeping Shabbat, and the next thing you know, he's leaning out his window, blowing a ram's horn.
Oh, mine's not a ram's horn, but it is a shofar. But no, we started with Shabbat. Started examining the feasts of Israel, and there's 7 major ones that are prescribed by God. There's others that have been added, and you can debate the historicity and the requirements of those, but there's 7 that have been commanded by God.
Right. Now, when you keep the law, how much of it are you keeping? Because you could say that there's laws about, blending your fabrics. Do you wear a poly?
So
blend?
there's a couple of ways to translate that passage on blending fabrics, and the most direct translation of it is don't wear a mixture of wool and linen.
Right.
And I was actually just talking to a dude on Instagram about this the other day. The blending of fabrics, the most accurate translation is wool and linen. And there's a study that was done like forever ago on the frequency of fabrics, and that's really outside of the scope of this conversation.
Right.
Because I'm not looking for a good reason to do what God says. I'm looking to do what God says.
Right.
And if there is a good reason attached to it, cool. But we know for a fact that the high priest wore garments of wool and garments of linen together. We know that for a fact. You read what his garments are, and it deliberately says that part of it's made of wool and another part of it's made of linen.
Okay.
And so one interpretation of blended fabrics is basically, hey, don't go dressing up like the high priest because you're not him.
Got it.
That's one interpretation of it. And based off of the reading that it is wool and linen that you're not supposed to blend together, that's the translation that I think makes the most sense, but I'm open to hearing arguments on it. The frequency of fabrics is interesting, but like I said, it's beyond the scope of this conversation.
Right.
So
in general, the answer is you keep the laws that you interpret as being applicable to you.
Right.
As
I'm not that
Levite.
I'm not a Levite. I'm not the high priest. I'm not a woman.
Right.
So that discounts, which the whole idea of 613 commandments is actually extra biblical, because we know there's more than 613. But for a better argument, or for lack of a better argument right now, in an extremely long rabbit hole, let's just assume there's 613. Well, about 200 of them are for the high priest and the Levites, and about 200 of them are for women. So that leaves about 200 of them that are for me.
Yeah, which, by the way, means that there's no two people that are under the entirety of the law.
Exactly.
Women can't be priests.
Right.
It's one of their laws.
Right. And the priests can't be women.
Right.
So,
okay, how about this one? Practicing Jews sometimes keep 2 different refrigerators or even 2 different kitchens for not blending their meats and their dairies.
right. So
What do?
So that rule says not to boil a calf or a young goat, depending on how you read it, in its mother's milk.
Right.
There's a adjacent rule that goes along with it, that says not to take the eggs and the mother at the same time. And there's one interpretation of it that, like, you're not supposed to basically cut off the full source of life at one go. You're not supposed to take mama and babies to where there will be nothing new. But despite that interpretation, which I think there's some validity to it, despite that interpretation, there was a pagan ritual in Canaan at the time that was being written, where they would milk the goat and they would boil it, and they would toss the infant goat that had just been born in the boiling milk. And it was a fertility ritual. Why, I don't know. But a lot of those things...
a very odd kink.
I know. A lot of those ones that don't make sense were tied to fertility rituals that the Canaanites were doing. So he's basically saying, hey, don't go participating in this witchcraft that these groups are doing. What's crazy is there's a lot of comments in the Old Testament, in the Torah, about fertility. And you find out that Yahweh's in charge of, who gets born and who doesn't, who keeps breathing and who doesn't. He's the author and creator of life. And when you start going and looking for life outside of him, it doesn't end well.
Right.
And it's because people are trying to circumvent the true source of life and do things on their own terms.
Okay, so do you use contraception?
So
I know that's a very personal question.
That is a very personal question.
But I feel like it's relevant.
It actually can be very relevant to it.
Give me what you just said.
No, because I opened that door so we can go there. Do not use any unnatural methods to prevent the birth of children.
Okay. So define unnatural.
So any kind of pill, any kind of abortion. My wife and I do use condoms, but how is that different than withdrawal, in all honesty?
It's a lot different, but...
Okay, explain.
I mean, they always say you dribble before you shoot.
You do.
Basically, long story short, it's not a reliable method of contraception. It's
not.
Far less.
You got about 60%, and that's if you do it right.
Yeah, then condoms. I would say if you're going to go 100% natural, you should do it on a rhythm basis.
Yeah, there's people who cycle time it, and if you do it right, you can go about 80%. But Mr. 6 kids over there.
Yeah. Well, and because no, we just won't go in there.
No, I know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I haven't been convicted on that, because you're essentially asking an opinion on something that I don't have a written text saying that, hey, you're just going to.
Yeah, so I think this actually does a really good job of summing up exactly where you are in regards to law. We've talked about meat and dairy. We've talked about fabrics. We've talked about Shabbat. We've talked about contraception, and you've got different answers for all of them. So
if I have a written text for something that clearly says something, it's like, okay, I'm going to use that to inform how I walk. Right. But I don't have written clarity on contraception. I morally have a problem with abortion.
Right. Now,
I pharmaceutically, not morally, but I pharmaceutically have some serious questions about oral contraception.
Yeah, hormone therapy is probably, more and more research is coming out that it's probably not great.
It's not as consequence-free as a lot of people seem to be claiming that it is.
It very much alters female behavior.
Right.
Which some people are saying that might be contributing to some of the weird gender relations and sexual relationships people have between.
Right.
Because women are selecting differently now than they used to.
Right.
And it's natural. It's very strange.
Well, and I get it. You can make a case for, you had the dude who spilled the semen on the ground.
Onan.
Yeah.
Onanism, yes.
Well, you look into what was going on. He was practicing a levirate marriage, which is where he sires a child on behalf of his dead brother.
Right.
And he didn't want to do that.
He was trying to avoid the responsibility of raising another legitimate child, which is expensive.
Well, it is, but he didn't want...
And split his inheritance, by the way.
Right. Well, guaranteed would have split his inheritance.
Right.
But he didn't want to deal with that. He wanted to do things on his terms.
Right.
And so I think it's more than just spilling his semen on the ground.
Yeah, he was denying his sister-in-law's, Tamar's, basically her right to Social Security is what that was. And so it was
there's more to it than just pulling out, because he probably wasn't the first dude to pull out.
Yeah, we get very fixated on the details, and it seems like at least my reading of it as a lit major, that term was more euphemistic for
Right.
a bigger social interaction that was going on in that thing, which is easier to miss when you don't study Jewish history and culture.
And so
that's the case for why
Yeah.
following law is actually a good idea. It's because you can understand your faith a lot better if you do.
Right. And so, you know, I wear tzitzit because it's a command to remember and do the laws of Yahweh your Elohim. It's a physical reminder. Hey, this is a covenant. We keep it. And that's where I fall on a lot of it. Going back to the feasts that I was hitting on, you have 7 of them. We started with Sukkot, which is the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles. And it is all throughout the literature in Sukkot that it's Yahweh dwelling with his people. We will dwell with him forever. And it's pointing forward to his ultimate rule and reign when he's in charge of everything and every knee bows to him and we dwell with him forever. It's also pointing back to when Israel was in Egypt and left and they were wandering in the wilderness. But we will be his people and he will be our God. It's forward and back. There's a lot of cyclicalness to it. But there's a total of 7 feasts. There's Passover, and anyone who spent any time in church understands that Jesus is the Passover lamb. Like, that's pretty explicit in the New Testament that he's the Passover lamb. There's an argument that he was crucified on Passover, like at the same time that the Passover lambs were being slaughtered. There is an argument for it, which is outside of the scope of this video, but we know he was at least around that time crucified. The next feast after Passover is indicatively tied into it, unleavened bread, and it's the removing of leaven, which leaven is symbolic for sin, the removing of sin from your life. Well, who removes our sin? Yeshua. He removed our sin. 3 days after Passover, after his execution, when he rose again, it happened to be something called first fruits, which is kind of a moving target because it's 3 days after the start of Passover, and Passover is kind of on a moving timeline, but it just so happened to line up with the day after that Shabbat, which was 3 days after Passover that year. And first fruits is when you bring the first fruits of your garden and you present them to Yahweh. And when Jesus rose, he was the first fruits of the resurrection, and he presented himself to the Father like, hey, I'm alive, which is really cool. And then 7 weeks after that, you get into Pentecost, or the Feast of Weeks, and you bring all of your barley harvest before Yahweh. And it is one of the lesser understood feasts, but what's going on is it's when the covenant was renewed, and in the New Testament it's when the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, was poured out on the church. 3,000 people were added to their number that day. Well, guess what? The first Pentecost, 3,000 people were subtracted from their number because they had just worshipped the golden calf. And Aaron was doing his doobly-doo, and it was like, oh no, I'm gonna blame these other people for what I did. And yeah, he probably didn't cast it himself, but he ordered it done. And 3,000 people were deleted from Israel that day. Well, you have the new Pentecost that's coming, and 3,000 people were added to their number that day because they accepted Yeshua as their Messiah and put their faith and trust in him. So kind of cool. You have a whole cyclical. Then you have the fall feasts. You have you have the Day of Trumpets, which is the announcement of the coming of the King. You have Atonement, which is the judgment that the King of the world places over everybody, opens up the books and says, hey, you followed me. Hey, you didn't. Depart from me, I didn't know you. Or, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy and splendor of your master. The sheep on the one side and the goats on the other. It's a great white throne judgment is what it is. And that's the Day of Atonement. And then you have Sukkot, which is indicative of the millennial kingdom. So all of these feasts are cyclical and they point to who Jesus is, and you can study them and learn a lot of cool things, but I'm participating in them. And I mean, talk about the Old Testament coming to life. You have all of these incidences where it mentions these feasts or the time of year that these feasts are taking place, and you're seeing some really special, cool things happen in the Old Testament that I missed otherwise. And maybe some scholars are finding them, you know, without having to do them, but I never even began to want to look for them until starting to put some of these things into practice.
Right.
And Mr. J.D. Stone over here affectionately calls me, what is it? A
Messianic goy boy.
A Messianic goy boy. And to call myself Messianic, I follow the Messiah.
Yeah.
But I'm not Jewish by birth. I'm not pretending to be Jewish.
No.
I have a deep respect for it.
And
And
from the other side of the house, what brand of Big C Christian is the church that you attend?
I attend an independent Christian church,
Right. Now, is it more...
which that is an offshoot of Church of Christ.
Okay.
They departed from the Church of Christ like 60 or 70 years ago or whatever.
Okay.
Because there were some things that they just disagreed with. But honestly, it's run like a non-denominational church.
Okay.
The only two things that like differentiate from what you see in your typical non-denominational church is we do communion every Sunday, because some people take do this as often as you gather. When Jesus is prescribing the Lord's Supper, air quotes, the Lord's Supper, they take that as, oh, hey, every time we meet, we're supposed to break bread and drink wine. Okay. It says in Acts that they were breaking bread together. It mentions nothing about wine. It's a euphemism, but cool. It's something the group I do does.
Do they use wine?
No, grape juice.
Welch.
Yeah, well, currently we have the, what is it? It's the...
Put on your tinfoil hat and say that communion is just a psyop from Welch's grape juice.
Probably, but I'm not going to go there today. But no, we currently have the Jesus Lunchables for the Center on the Go, which is, coming out of the Wuhan flu, where it's the little packet that has a tiny little shot of grape juice in it with a very, very disgustingly tasted wafer that has no resemblance to matzah. And if you've made matzah, you know what I'm talking about. It's delicious. So that's what we do every time we gather, is we partake in communion. And my church teaches that you have to be baptized. It's like, hey, you've accepted Christ, let's get baptized. And some people in my church believe that baptism is required for salvation. I disagree wholeheartedly. I believe that it is part of the process. I don't think that it's required. But anybody who refuses baptism, I have some serious questions. Right. So, like, it's a self-licking ice cream cone kind of a problem. Like, I don't know anybody who has accepted Christ that refuses baptism. I know plenty of people who don't put much emphasis on it.
Right. Well, and this would be a much bigger issue if there was as much intense persecution of Christians as there was in Trajan's day.
Exactly. And here's the crazy thing. Baptism has roots in the mikvah, which predates baptism by thousands of years. And every time in the Old Testament where it says go take a bath, which it doesn't legitimately say that, it says go wash, is talking about a mikvah. And it is the purification of your outer self to where you can now enter into holy space. And there it is. But the mikvah, Jesus partook in a mikvah when John the Baptist or Yohanan the Immerser, whatever you want to call him, washed him. And then he did command.
The pronunciations of these are so white.
You're welcome. But the I told you I speak it with an accent.
Yeah, I will retract white. That's a bad term. They are very American.
You're welcome, sir. Rural South American.
Yes.
But anyway, the
you do say Yeshua, so we're going to give you credit where it's due.
well, thank you. But anyway, and that's a guess at the pronunciation. But anyway, so Jesus did command his disciples, hey, go and baptize people. So I think it's part of the process. But
So I think, to sum up, the brand of Christian you are is one that is intensely engaged with your religion rather than the typical Christian who just very casually and doesn't understand the religion very well.
Well, and the thing is am I wrong about some things? Yeah, I probably am. And is my way the only way to understand these things? No, it's not. Do I think that people who follow Jesus but don't follow Torah are going to be in heaven? You better believe I do. Do I think that there's people who claim that they follow Torah and Jesus that aren't going to be in heaven? You better believe I do. There's some assholes out there that they say they're doing this, but their actions are not lining up with the Word of God. There's some people who say that, you know, you have to keep Torah to be saved, and they are severely misinformed or lying, or both. There are some people who say that what I am doing is wrong. Okay, cool. That's fine. Thank you. I appreciate the input. Doing the best I can with what I got where I'm at. And am I wrong about some things? Yeah, probably. But I have found a deep richness in trying to keep Torah, and I don't do it well. I mess up all the time. But I'm learning so much. And anybody who is doing this as well for the right reasons, I think can tell you the same thing, that they're learning a ton and just trying to be a perpetual student. Before we sign off, you got anything, Mr. J.D. Stone?
No, I just think that it does kind of, there's just a connection to me between, you know, talking about the things we're more familiar with and the differences in denomination. You know, this guy does predestination, this guy doesn't, but we kind of accept that, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
In the end. And your more Jewish leanings in the way you're engaging with this is just a slightly more Semitic variation on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all that is.
Don't quit studying. Don't quit reading. Go do hard things.
My guess is I need to get